The rain came down in sheets, so thick Grace Summers could barely see her own hands as she scrambled beneath the wooden porch, soaked to the bone and shivering so violently her teeth clattered together like castanets. Colorado City, Wyoming Territory in the summer of 1876, was supposed to be dry and dusty, but the storm that rolled in from the mountains had turned the streets into rivers of mud and sent everyone with any sense running for shelter. Grace had no shelter to run to, not anymore, not since the fire that took the boarding house 3 days ago, and with it every possession she owned except the dress on her back and the small leather pouch hidden beneath her corset. She pressed herself against the cold earth beneath the porch, trying to make herself as small as possible as thunder cracked overhead like rifle shots. The house above her was dark and quiet, and she prayed whoever lived there would not notice the muddy tracks she had left on their steps or hear her labored breathing as she tried to calm her racing heart. Running from Clayton Marsh and his men for 2 days straight had left her exhausted, terrified, and desperate enough to hide like a wounded animal under a stranger's home. The sound of boots on wood made her freeze. Heavy footsteps crossed the porch above her head, and she could see through the gaps in the boards the outline of a man, tall and broad-shouldered. The boots stopped right above where she huddled, and for a long moment there was only silence and the drumming of rain. "I know you are under there," a man's voice said, deep and surprisingly gentle. "Come on out before you catch your death." Grace said nothing, pressing her hand over her mouth to stifle any sound. Maybe if she stayed quiet enough, he would assume he was mistaken and go back inside. "I saw you crawl under there 10 minutes ago from my window," the voice continued, "and I have been heating water for a bath ever since. Now you can come out on your own, or I can come down there and pull you out, but either way, you are not spending the night under my porch in this storm." Still Grace remained silent, torn between fear of this stranger and fear of the men hunting her. At least under the porch she was hidden. Out in the open she would be vulnerable. She heard the man sigh, and then the boots moved away. For a moment she thought he had given up, but then she heard his front door open and close, and seconds later she saw his legs coming down the porch steps. He crouched down, and a face appeared in the gap beneath the porch, half hidden in shadow but with kind eyes that caught what little light remained in the storm-darkened evening. "My name is Samuel Yates," he said. "I am the blacksmith here in town, and I have lived in this house alone since my pa died last winter. I promise you, whatever you are running from, you will not find it here, but you will find a warm fire, dry clothes, and hot food if you will just come inside." Grace stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or cruelty. She had gotten good at reading men in the years since she left home, had learned to spot the ones who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes, the ones who offered help with one hand while reaching for something else with the other. This man, this Samuel Yates, looked at her with nothing but concern and a kind of sad understanding that made her throat tighten. "I am in trouble," she whispered, the first words she had spoken in hours. "Bad men are looking for me. If I come into your house, I might bring that trouble to your door." "Then I will deal with it when it comes," Samuel said simply. "But right now you are cold and wet and scared, and that is something I can help with. Please, let me help." Something in his voice, in the quiet sincerity of his words, made the decision for her. Grace nodded, and Samuel reached under the porch, extending his hand to her. She took it, his palm warm and calloused and steady, and he helped pull her out from beneath the house and into the pouring rain. Up close, Samuel Yates was even taller than she had thought, with dark hair plastered to his head by the rain and brown eyes that looked at her with such kindness it almost hurt. He was perhaps 27 or 28, she guessed, with the strong build of a man who worked with his hands and the weathered face of someone who spent his days in the heat of a forge. He did not hesitate or show any disgust at her muddy, bedraggled appearance. Instead, he simply swept her up into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all and carried her up the steps and into his house. "Oh, I will get mud everywhere," Grace protested weakly, but Samuel just shook his head. "Mud washes away," he said, kicking the door closed behind them. "Pneumonia does not." The inside of his house was small but clean, with a stone fireplace where a cheerful fire crackled and a large copper tub set up in front of it, steam rising from the water already filling it. Samuel set Grace down gently on a chair near the fire and immediately went to add more hot water to the tub from a kettle on the hearth. "I will step outside while you bathe," he said, not looking at her as he worked. "There is soap there on the table, and I will leave some of my mother's old clothes by the door. They should fit you well enough. Take your time, and when you are done, just call out and I will come back in and make us some supper." "Why are you doing this?" Grace asked, still shivering despite the warmth of the fire. "You do not know me. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous." Samuel turned to look at her then, and something in his expression made her heart skip a beat. "You are a woman hiding under a porch in a rainstorm," he said quietly. "That tells me everything I need to know. You need help, and I am in a position to give it. That is all that matters." Before Grace could respond, he had grabbed his coat and hat from a peg by the door and stepped back out into the rain, closing the door firmly behind him. Grace sat for a moment, staring at the door, trying to understand what had just happened. In her 22 years of life, she had encountered very few men who showed kindness without expecting something in return, and none who had shown her the sort of quiet, matter-of-fact compassion that Samuel Yates had just displayed. Finally, when she had convinced herself that he was not coming back in, and that this was not some elaborate trick, Grace stood on shaking legs and began to peel off her wet clothing. The water in the tub was gloriously hot, and when she sank into it, she could not suppress a small sound of relief as the warmth seeped into her frozen limbs. She scrubbed herself clean with the soap, watching as the water turned brown with mud and grime, and tried not to think about Clayton Marsh or his men, or the fact that she had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. The clothes Samuel had left were simple but clean, a plain cotton dress that must have belonged to his mother and undergarments that were a bit loose but serviceable. Grace dressed quickly, wringing out her wet hair as best she could, and then called out tentatively, "I am finished." The door opened almost immediately, and Samuel came back in, shaking rain from his hat. He had clearly been standing just outside the door the whole time, waiting in the storm to give her privacy, and Grace felt a rush of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I do not know how I can repay you for your kindness." "No repayment necessary," Samuel said, hanging up his wet coat. "Now sit down by the fire and get warm while I heat up some stew. I made a big pot yesterday, so there is plenty." As Samuel busied himself at the stove, Grace sat in the chair he had indicated and watched him work. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own space, and she found herself relaxing slightly despite her circumstances. The house was cozy, filled with simple furniture that looked handmade and sturdy, and there were small touches that spoke of a life lived alone but not without care. Books lined a shelf by the window, and a half-finished piece of metalwork sat on a table in the corner, intricate scrollwork that suggested Samuel was skilled at his trade. "Here," Samuel said, handing her a bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread. "Eat. You look like you have not had a proper meal in days." He was right. Grace had been living on whatever she could steal or scavenge since the fire, too afraid to show her face in town where Marsh might have eyes watching. The stew was simple but delicious, rich with beef and vegetables, and she had to force herself to eat slowly instead of wolfing it down like an animal. Samuel took his own bowl and sat in the chair across from her, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the steady drum of rain on the roof. Finally, when Grace had finished her second helping and was cradling a cup of hot coffee in her hands, Samuel spoke. "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to," he said. "But if you are in trouble, maybe I can help. I know most folks in Colorado City, and I have some friends who might be able to assist if you need protection or a place to stay." Grace looked down at her coffee, watching the steam curl up from the dark liquid. Part of her wanted to keep her secrets, to protect this kind stranger from the danger that followed her. But another part, the part that was so tired of running and hiding and being afraid, wanted to tell him everything, to share the burden she had been carrying alone for so long. "My name is Grace Summers," she said finally. "I came to Colorado City 6 months ago from Missouri. I was working as a seamstress at the boarding house, saving money to eventually open my own dress shop. 3 days ago, the boarding house burned down. Everyone got out safely, thank God, but we lost everything. And that same night, a man named Clayton Marsh approached me." Samuel's expression darkened at the name. "I know Marsh. He runs the Silver Dollar Saloon and thinks he owns half this town. He is a snake and a cheat, and most folks around here give him a wide berth. He told me that I owed him money," Grace continued, her voice shaking slightly. "He said that the boarding house owner had borrowed from him and that the debt transferred to the boarders now that the house was gone. It made no sense, but he had papers that looked official, and he had 3 men with him who looked like they would be happy to enforce his claim. He said I could work off the debt at his saloon." Samuel's jaw tightened, and Grace could see anger flickering in his eyes. "Working at the Silver Dollar means only one thing, and it has nothing to do with serving drinks." "I know," Grace said quietly. "I told him no, that I would not do it, and I tried to leave. But his men blocked my way, and Marsh said that if I did not come willingly, they would make me come. So I ran. I have been hiding for 3 days, sleeping in alleys and under porches, trying to figure out what to do. I thought about leaving town entirely, but I have no money for a stagecoach, and I would not make it far on foot before they caught me." "You are safe here," Samuel said firmly. "Marsh and his men are not touching you. I promise you that." "You cannot make that promise," Grace said, looking up at him with eyes full of fear and exhaustion. "You do not know what he is capable of. He has money and men, and he always gets what he wants. If you stand in his way, he will destroy you too." "Then he can try," Samuel said, his voice calm but filled with steel. "I am not afraid of Clayton Marsh, and I am not going to let him hurt you. You are staying here in this house where you will be safe. We will figure out the rest together." Grace wanted to protest, to tell him that he was being foolish, that he did not understand the danger. But the look in his eyes stopped her. It was the look of a man who had made up his mind and would not be swayed, the look of someone who had decided that she was worth protecting, no matter the cost. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk so much for someone you just met?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but honest. "Because 8 years ago, when I was 19 and stupid and thought I knew everything, my younger sister found herself in trouble. A man in town took advantage of her, and when she asked for help, nobody would stand with her. They said it was not their business, that she should have been more careful, that getting involved would only bring trouble to their doors. So she left town in the middle of the night, and I have not seen her since. I do not even know if she is alive. I swore to myself then that if I ever had the chance to help someone who needed it, I would not turn away. I would not be like those people who let fear make them cowards. Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. "I am sorry about your sister," she said. "I hope she is somewhere safe and happy." "So do I," Samuel said, then managed a small smile. "But right now, I am going to make sure you stay safe and happy. That is my new mission." Grace laughed despite herself, a wet, shaky sound that was part sob and part genuine amusement. "I am not sure happy is possible at the moment, but safe sounds wonderful." "Then we will start with safe and work our way up to happy," Samuel said. "Now, it is late and you are exhausted. You can sleep in my mother's old room upstairs. I will take the couch down here. Tomorrow we can make a plan for dealing with Marsh, but tonight, just rest." Grace wanted to argue, to insist that she take the couch and let him have his own bed, but the truth was she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. The hot bath, the warm food, and the relief of being somewhere safe after days of fear and cold had caught up with her all at once, and she could feel exhaustion pulling at her like a physical weight. Samuel showed her upstairs to a small but comfortable room with a bed covered in a faded quilt and a window that looked out over the darkened street. He lit a lantern for her and set it on the bedside table, then paused in the doorway. "Sleep well, Grace Summers," he said, "and do not worry. I am a light sleeper, and I have my rifle down here with me. Nobody is getting into this house without me knowing about it." "Thank you, Samuel Yates," Grace said, sitting down on the edge of the bed, "for everything. I do not know what I did to deserve your kindness, but I am grateful for it." "You do not have to do anything to deserve kindness," Samuel said gently. "You just have to be a person who needs it, and that is enough. Good night, Grace." "Good night, Samuel." He closed the door quietly, and Grace listened to his footsteps descending the stairs. Then she pulled off the borrowed dress, climbed under the quilt in just her undergarments, and fell asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. Grace woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of bacon frying. For a confused moment she did not know where she was, and panic seized her heart. Then memory returned, and with it a sense of relief so profound it made her chest ache. She was in Samuel Yates's house. She was safe. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to find Samuel at the stove, cooking breakfast with the same quiet competence he had shown the night before. He had changed into clean clothes, a simple work shirt and trousers, and his dark hair was still damp as though he had recently washed. "Good morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in days," Grace admitted. "Thank you for letting me stay." "You are welcome to stay as long as you need," Samuel said, sliding eggs and bacon onto 2 plates. "I have been thinking about your situation with Marsh, and I have some ideas, but we can talk about it over breakfast." They sat at the small kitchen table, and Grace found herself studying Samuel in the morning light. He was handsome in a rough-hewn sort of way, with strong features, and the kind of steady presence that made her feel safe just being near him. There was something deeply honest about him, a straightforwardness that was refreshing after so many years of dealing with men who said one thing and meant another. "So here is what I think," Samuel said after they had eaten for a few minutes. "Marsh's claim on you is nonsense. There is no legal way a boarding house owner's debt transfers to the boarders, especially not for something like the amount he is claiming. He is just trying to intimidate you into working for him because he thinks you are alone and vulnerable. But you are not alone anymore. I am going to go talk to Sheriff Donovan today and explain the situation. Tom is a good man and a fair sheriff. He does not like Marsh any more than I do, and he will make it clear that Marsh needs to back off." Grace felt a flutter of hope but also fear. What if the sheriff is in Marsh's pocket? What if he takes Marsh's side? Tom is not like that, Samuel assured her. I have known him since we were boys. He is honest to a fault and he does not tolerate bullies. He will help us, I promise. And what about your reputation? Grace asked. Having me stay here, unmarried and alone with you, people will talk. You could be ruined. Samuel shrugged, seeming unconcerned. People can talk all they want. I know the truth and so do you. That is all that matters. Besides, my reputation is solid enough to withstand a little gossip. And if anyone has a problem with me helping someone in need, they can take it up with me directly. Grace felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in a long time. It was admiration mixed with gratitude and something else, something she was not quite ready to name yet. Samuel Yates was unlike any man she had ever met, and she was beginning to realize just how lucky she was that she had chosen his porch to hide under. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know what else to say except thank you." "You do not have to say anything," Samuel replied. "Just finish your breakfast and then make yourself comfortable. I need to go to the smithy for a few hours this morning to finish up a job I promised to a rancher, and then I will go talk to Tom. Will you be all right here alone for a while?" "Yes," Grace said, though the thought of being alone made her nervous. "I will stay inside and keep the doors locked." "Good," Samuel said. He stood and took his hat from the peg by the door, then paused. "Grace, I want you to know something. Last night when I said you were mine to protect, I meant it. Not in a possessive way, but in a way that means you are under my care now, and I take that responsibility seriously. You are safe here, not just in this house but with me. I will not let anyone hurt you. Do you understand?" Grace nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I understand. And Samuel, I think you are a good man, maybe the best man I have ever met." Samuel's cheeks colored slightly, and he looked away, suddenly bashful. "I am just doing what anyone should do," he mumbled. "I will be back in a few hours. Stay safe." After he left, Grace spent the morning exploring the house and trying to make herself useful. She washed the breakfast dishes, tidied up the kitchen, and even swept the floors, feeling strange doing domestic tasks in someone else's home, but wanting to repay Samuel's kindness in some small way. She found herself thinking about him constantly, replaying their conversations in her mind and marveling at his gentleness and strength. It was close to noon when she heard voices outside, and her heart seized with fear. She crept to the window and peered out carefully, then gasped. Clayton Marsh was standing in the street in front of Samuel's house, and he had 3 men with him, the same 3 who had tried to corner her 3 days ago. "I know you are in there, Miss Summers," Marsh called out, his voice carrying easily through the quiet street. "Come out now, and we can settle this like civilized people. Keep hiding, and things will get unpleasant." Grace backed away from the window, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She looked around desperately for a weapon, something she could use to defend herself, and grabbed a heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "Miss Summers," Marsh called again. "I am losing my patience. Either you come out or we come in. Your choice." Grace heard footsteps on the porch and knew with sinking certainty that Marsh had decided not to wait for her answer. The door handle rattled, but the lock held. Then there was a heavy thud as someone put their shoulder to the door, and Grace heard the wood begin to crack. She was just backing toward the stairs, thinking wildly that she might be able to barricade herself in the bedroom when she heard a new voice, loud and furious. "Step away from that door, Marsh, or I will put you on the ground where you belong. Samuel." Grace ran back to the window and saw him striding down the street toward his house, his face set in lines of cold anger. Behind him was another man, older and wearing a sheriff's badge, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. Marsh turned and Grace saw something flicker across his face, annoyance mixed with calculation. "Yates," he said smoothly, "this does not concern you. I have business with Miss Summers." "You have no business with anyone under my roof," Samuel said, stopping a few feet from Marsh. "And you have about 5 seconds to get off my property before I make you leave." "Now, Samuel, let us be reasonable," Marsh said, holding up his hands in a gesture of false peace. "Miss Summers owes me money, legitimate debt that I have every right to collect. I am just here to discuss repayment terms. You are here to intimidate and threaten a woman who has done nothing wrong," the sheriff said, stepping forward. "And you are about to find yourself in a jail cell if you do not move along right now." Marsh's face hardened. "I have legal documents, Sheriff Donovan, signed and witnessed. This is a legitimate debt collection. Then you can bring those documents to my office and we can review them properly," Sheriff Donovan said. "But you will not be harassing anyone or breaking down doors. Is that clear?" For a long moment, Marsh just stared at the sheriff and Samuel, and Grace could see the wheels turning in his head as he calculated whether it was worth pushing the confrontation. Finally, he smiled, but it was a cold, unpleasant expression that did not reach his eyes. "Of course, Sheriff," he said. "I will bring the documents by your office this afternoon, but Miss Summers should know that debts do not disappear just because you make friends with the local blacksmith. One way or another, she will pay what she owes." "Get out of here, Marsh," Samuel said, his voice low and dangerous. "And if I see you near my house or anywhere near Grace again, legal documents or not, you will be dealing with me. Understand?" Marsh's smile widened, showing teeth. "I understand perfectly, Yates. Come on, boys. Let us go." He turned and walked away with his men following, but Grace could see the tension in his shoulders and knew that this was not over. Marsh was not a man who took well to being challenged, and she had just seen him humiliated in front of his own men. He would not forget that, and he would not forgive it. The moment Marsh was out of sight, Samuel bounded up the porch steps and threw open the door. "Grace, are you all right?" "I am fine," Grace said, though her voice shook. She was still holding the poker, and Samuel gently took it from her trembling hands. "You are safe," he said, his voice filled with concern. "I am sorry I was not here. We were at the sheriff's office when someone told us Marsh was heading this way. We got here as fast as we could." Sheriff Donovan came in behind Samuel, a tall man with graying hair and sharp blue eyes that assessed Grace with professional interest. "Miss Summers, I am Tom Donovan, the sheriff here in Colorado City. Samuel has told me about your situation, and I want you to know that you are under my protection now. Marsh cannot touch you." "Thank you, Sheriff," Grace said. "But he seemed very confident about those documents he mentioned. What if they are real?" "Even if they are, which I doubt, there are proper legal channels for debt collection," Tom said. "He cannot just kidnap you or force you to work for him. That is illegal, no matter what papers he waves around. I will review his documents when he brings them, but I expect they are either forgeries or deliberately misleading. Marsh is a schemer, but he is not as clever as he thinks he is." "What happens now?" Grace asked, looking between the two men. "Now you stay here with Samuel, where you are safe," Tom said. "I will keep an eye on Marsh and make sure he knows that any further harassment will result in serious consequences. And Samuel, you might want to consider keeping that rifle of yours close for the next few days, just in case Marsh decides to try something stupid." "Already planned on it," Samuel said grimly. After the sheriff left, Samuel insisted that Grace sit down while he made her some tea to calm her nerves. She sank into the chair by the fireplace, feeling drained and shaky from the adrenaline that had been coursing through her body. "I am so sorry," she said, as Samuel handed her a steaming cup. I brought this trouble right to your door, just like I said I would." "You did not bring anything," Samuel said firmly. "Marsh brought the trouble. You are just trying to survive. There is a difference. Still, you could have been hurt because of me. If Marsh had come while you were here alone, if he had started shooting, then I would have defended my home and the person I have sworn to protect," Samuel interrupted. "Grace, stop trying to take responsibility for the actions of a bad man. You did nothing wrong. Marsh is the villain here, not you." Grace looked up at him, at the earnest concern in his eyes and the gentle set of his mouth, and felt something shift inside her chest. This man, this near stranger who had carried her out of the rain and called her his, was defending her with a fierceness that took her breath away. He barely knew her, yet he was willing to stand between her and danger without hesitation. It was more than she had ever expected from anyone, more than she had ever dared to hope for. "You called me yours," she said softly. "Last night when you were talking to me, you said I was yours to protect. Did you mean that?" Samuel's expression softened, and he knelt down beside her chair so they were at eye level. "I meant every word," he said. "From the moment I saw you under that porch, cold and scared and alone, something in me said that you were meant to be here, that you were meant to be mine to care for. I know it sounds strange, I know we just met, but I feel it in my bones, Grace. You belong here with me where I can keep you safe." Grace felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were not tears of fear or exhaustion. They were tears of relief and wonder and something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I do not understand it, but from the moment you reached under that porch and offered me your hand, I felt like maybe I had finally found somewhere I could belong. Someone I could trust." Samuel reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Then stay," he said. "Not just until Marsh is dealt with, but after that too. Stay here with me. Let me take care of you. Let me protect you and make you happy. I know I am just a blacksmith. I do not have much to offer, but what I have is yours if you want it." "You are not just a blacksmith," Grace said, covering his hand with hers. "You are the kindest, bravest, most honorable man I have ever met. And yes, I want to stay. I want to stay with you more than I have ever wanted anything." Samuel's face lit up with a smile so bright and genuine that Grace felt her heart skip a beat. "Then you will stay," he said. "You will stay, and I will keep you safe, and we will figure out the rest as we go." He stood and pulled her gently to her feet, and for a moment they just stood there, looking at each other with something building between them that was electric and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Then Samuel leaned down slowly, giving Grace plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to, and pressed his lips softly to hers. The kiss was gentle and chaste, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent warmth flooding through Grace's entire body. When Samuel pulled back, he was smiling again, a tender, almost shy expression that made him look younger. "I have wanted to do that since I first saw you," he admitted. "Is that all right?" "More than all right," Grace said, feeling her cheeks flush. "It was perfect." They stood there for another moment, neither wanting to break the spell, until finally Samuel cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should get back to work," he said reluctantly. "I have a wagon wheel that needs repair, and the rancher is coming to pick it up this afternoon. But I do not want to leave you alone again, not after what happened this morning." "I will be fine," Grace assured him. "I will keep the doors locked, and I have that poker if I need it. Besides, Marsh just got a warning from the sheriff. I doubt he will try anything else today." Samuel looked uncertain but finally nodded. "All right. But if you hear anything at all that worries you, you come straight to the smithy. It is just 2 streets over, the big building with the chimney. You cannot miss it." "I promise," Grace said. After Samuel left, Grace spent the afternoon trying to keep herself busy. She found some mending that needed doing and worked on it while sitting by the window where she could watch the street. The afternoon passed quietly, with only the occasional passerby and no sign of Marsh or his men. By the time Samuel returned as the sun was starting to set, Grace had begun to relax slightly. "Any trouble?" Samuel asked as soon as he came in. "None," Grace reported. "It has been perfectly quiet. Did you hear anything from the sheriff?" "I stopped by his office on my way home," Samuel said, hanging up his hat. "Marsh never showed up with those documents he promised. Tom thinks he was bluffing, that he does not actually have any legal claim and was just hoping to intimidate you into cooperating. Tom has put out word around town that you are under his protection and that anyone who bothers you will answer to him. It should help." "Should help, but might not?" Grace asked, hearing the uncertainty in his voice. "Marsh is unpredictable," Samuel admitted. "He does not like being challenged, and he does not like losing. We need to stay vigilant." Over the next week, life settled into a strange new routine. Grace stayed in Samuel's house during the day, doing chores and making the place her own in small ways, rearranging the kitchen to be more efficient and mending clothes and linens that had been neglected since Samuel's mother passed. Samuel went to work at the smithy each morning and came home each evening, and they shared meals and conversation like an old married couple. But underneath the domestic peace, there was constant tension. Marsh had not made another move, but Grace could feel him watching, waiting. Several times she saw his men in the street outside, just standing there, not doing anything but making their presence known. It was intimidation, pure and simple, and it was working. Grace found herself jumping at every unexpected sound, unable to fully relax even in the safety of Samuel's home. The tension between Grace and Samuel was of a different sort. The attraction that had sparked between them that first night had only grown stronger, and Grace found herself thinking about Samuel constantly, noticing the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders when he worked, the gentle way he spoke to her, the kindness in his eyes. She caught him looking at her too, heated glances that made her breath catch and her skin flush. But Samuel was determinedly respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. He kissed her good night each evening, sweet gentle kisses that left her wanting more, but he always pulled away before things could go further, always made sure she felt safe and in control. It was driving Grace mad with longing. "Samuel," she said one evening as they sat together by the fire after supper, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," Samuel said, setting down the piece of metal he had been working on. "Anything." "Why do you always pull away?" Grace asked, then blushed furiously. "I mean when we kiss. You always stop so quickly, like you are afraid of something. Are you not attracted to me?" Samuel's eyes widened. "Not attracted to you. Grace, I am so attracted to you that it is taking every ounce of willpower I have not to kiss you every moment of every day. I pull away because I am trying to be respectful, to give you space and time to heal from everything you have been through. The last thing I want is for you to feel pressured or obligated." "I do not feel pressured," Grace said, moving closer to him on the couch. "I feel safe with you, Samuel. Safer than I have ever felt with anyone. And I want more than just chaste goodnight kisses. I want you to kiss me like you mean it. I want to feel desired and wanted, not just protected." Samuel swallowed hard, his eyes darkening. "Grace, if I start kissing you the way I want to, I am not sure I will be able to stop." "Then do not stop," Grace said, reaching up to cup his face with her hand. "Samuel Yates, I want you. I have wanted you since that first night when you carried me in from the rain and looked at me like I mattered. Please, stop being so noble and just kiss me." Something in Samuel seemed to snap. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms with a groan, and kissed her with all the pent-up passion he had been holding back. This was not a gentle, respectful kiss. This was heat and need and desire. His hands tangling in her hair as he deepened the kiss, and Grace responded with equal fervor, pressing herself against him and opening her mouth to his tongue. They kissed until they were both breathless, until Grace was half lying on the couch with Samuel braced above her, his weight pressing her into the cushions in a way that made her feel claimed and cherished all at once. When they finally broke apart, both of them were flushed and panting. "Grace," Samuel said, his voice rough, "if we keep going, I will not want to stop, and you are not my wife. I do not want to dishonor you." "Then make me your wife," Grace said, the words tumbling out before she could think them through. "Marry me, Samuel. I know it has only been a week. I know people will think we are crazy, but I do not care. I love you. I love you, and I want to be yours in every way, not just in words, but in truth." Samuel stared at her, his expression a mixture of shock and joy and something that looked like reverence. "You love me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love you," Grace confirmed, reaching up to stroke his face. "I know it is fast, I know it is probably foolish, but it is true. You saved me, Samuel, in more ways than one. You gave me shelter and safety and kindness, but more than that, you gave me hope. You made me believe that there are still good men in the world, that I could trust someone again, that I could be happy. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "I love you too," Samuel said, and there were tears in his eyes. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you under that porch, cold and scared and trying so hard to be brave. You are the strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever met, and I want nothing more than to make you my wife." "But Grace, are you sure? Are you sure this is what you want and not just gratitude or fear of being alone?" "I am sure," Grace said firmly. "Samuel, I have had a week to think about this, a week to watch you and talk to you and get to know you. I have seen your kindness and your strength, your patience and your humor. I have seen how you treat the people in town with respect and fairness. I have seen how you treat me like I am precious and worth protecting. This is not gratitude. This is love, real and true, and I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Samuel kissed her again, a long, deep kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Then we will get married," he said, "as soon as we can arrange it. I will talk to Reverend Williams tomorrow, and we will have a simple ceremony, just us and a few witnesses. And then you will be Mrs. Grace Yates, and I will be the luckiest man in Wyoming Territory." "Grace Yates," Grace repeated, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about the future with an excitement that pushed away thoughts of marsh and danger and everything else that threatened their happiness. For the first time since she had arrived in Colorado City, Grace felt truly hopeful about what lay ahead. The next morning, Samuel went to speak with Reverend Williams while Grace stayed home and tried to figure out what she would wear for her wedding. She had nothing but the dress Samuel's mother had left behind, but she found some ribbon and lace in a drawer and set about altering it to make it more festive. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost did not hear the knock at the door. When it came again, louder and more insistent, Grace set down her sewing and went to answer it, expecting maybe one of Samuel's friends or a customer from the smithy. Instead, when she opened the door, she found herself face to face with Clayton Marsh. She tried to slam the door shut immediately, but Marsh was faster, jamming his boot into the doorway and forcing it back open. Now, Miss Summers," he said, pushing his way into the house. "That is no way to greet a guest. Get out," Grace said, backing away from him. "Get out, or I will scream." "Scream all you want," Marsh said, closing the door behind him. "Your precious blacksmith is on the other side of town, and nobody else is going to come running to help you. We are going to have a conversation, you and I, about your future." "I do not have anything to say to you," Grace said, continuing to back away until she felt the wall behind her. "The sheriff told you to leave me alone." "The sheriff can go to hell," Marsh said pleasantly. "Do you know what your problem is, Miss Summers? You think that because you have caught yourself a protector, you are safe. You think that Samuel Yates and his muscles and his noble intentions are going to keep me away from you. But here is the thing about protectors: they cannot watch you every second of every day. There are always gaps, always moments when you are vulnerable, like right now." Grace's hand crept behind her back, feeling along the wall for anything she could use as a weapon. Her fingers closed around a decorative candlestick on a small table, heavy iron that would make a decent club if she could get a good swing. "What do you want, Marsh?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I want you to understand your situation," Marsh said, taking a step closer. "You have made me look like a fool in front of my men and half the town. You have cost me time and effort and reputation. And now you are going to pay me back, one way or another. You can come work at my saloon willingly, or I can make sure that nobody in this town will hire you or help you. I can ruin Samuel Yates's business, burn down his smithy, make it so that helping you becomes the biggest mistake he ever made. Your choice, Miss Summers. What will it be?" "The choice is neither of those things," Grace said, and swung the candlestick with all her strength. Marsh tried to dodge, but he was too close and too confident that Grace would not fight back. The iron caught him on the side of the head with a sickening thud, and he stumbled backward, blood streaming down his face. "You crazy bitch," he snarled, reaching for her. Grace darted past him and ran for the door, but Marsh was faster than she expected despite being half-stunned. He caught her arm and yanked her back, his grip painfully tight. "You are going to regret that," he said, and raised his hand to strike her. The door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall, and Samuel stood in the doorway, his face a mask of fury. In 3 long strides he was across the room, and he grabbed Marsh by the collar and physically threw him away from Grace. Marsh hit the floor hard, and Samuel was on him immediately, one knee on his chest and his fist drawn back. "Samuel, stop," Grace cried, afraid of what would happen if Samuel actually hit Marsh. "Please do not do this. He is not worth it." Samuel froze, his whole body trembling with rage and the effort of holding himself back. Sheriff Donovan appeared in the doorway, gun drawn, and took in the scene with sharp eyes. "Step back, Samuel," Tom said quietly. "Let me handle this." Samuel slowly lowered his fist and stood up, but his eyes never left Marsh. The saloon owner scrambled to his feet, one hand pressed to his bleeding head. "He attacked me," Marsh sputtered. "You saw it, Sheriff. Yates attacked me in his own home." "I saw you holding Miss Summers by force and raising your hand to strike her," Tom said coldly. "And I heard her tell you to leave. That is assault and trespassing, Marsh. You are under arrest." "This is ridiculous," Marsh protested. "She hit me first. She is the one who should be arrested." "She defended herself in her own home against an intruder," Tom said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Now you can come quietly or I can drag you to the jail. Your choice." Marsh glared at Grace with such venom that she took an involuntary step back, pressing against Samuel's solid warmth as he wrapped a protective arm around her. "This is not over," Marsh said. "You think a night in jail is going to stop me? I have lawyers. I have friends in high places. I will be out by tomorrow, and when I am, you will wish you had taken my original offer." "That sounds like a threat," Tom said. "Making threats in front of a law officer, that is not smart, Marsh. Let us go." He marched Marsh out of the house, and Samuel immediately turned to Grace, his hands running over her arms and shoulders, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," Grace said, though she was shaking. I hit him with the candlestick before he could do anything. Samuel, how did you know to come back? Mrs. Patterson from next door saw Marsh go in and ran to get me, Samuel explained. I was at the Reverend's house and I ran the whole way. Grace, I am so sorry. I should never have left you alone. I thought Marsh would not dare try anything in broad daylight. You could not have known, Grace said, wrapping her arms around his waist and holding him tight. What matters is that you got here in time. You and the sheriff saved me. Samuel held her close, his face buried in her hair. We are getting married today, he said fiercely. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. I am not waiting another day to make you my wife. Once we are married, you will have all the legal protections that come with being Mrs. Yates. Marsh will not be able to touch you. Today, Grace repeated. Today, Samuel confirmed. I already talked to Reverend Williams and he is willing to perform the ceremony whenever we are ready. We just need 2 witnesses and I can get those from the smithy. Please, Grace, say you will marry me today. Grace looked up at him at the fierce protectiveness and love shining in his eyes and felt her heart swell. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you today, Samuel Yates, right now if you want. Samuel kissed her hard and fast, then grabbed her hand. Then let us go, the Reverend is waiting. An hour later, Grace stood in the small church in Colorado City, wearing her hastily altered dress, her hand clasped in Samuel's, and listened to Reverend Williams speak the words that would bind them together as husband and wife. Samuel's friends from the smithy stood as witnesses, and Mrs. Patterson had come along as well, beaming with delight at the romantic whirlwind wedding. Do you, Samuel Yates, take Grace Summers to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Samuel said, his voice strong and clear. And do you, Grace Summers, take Samuel Yates to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Grace said, tears of joy streaming down her face. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Samuel did not need to be told twice. He pulled Grace into his arms and kissed her with all the love and passion and promise of the future. And Grace kissed him back with equal fervor, not caring that they had an audience or that it was scandalously enthusiastic for a church wedding. When they finally broke apart, everyone was cheering and Grace felt happiness bubbling up inside her like champagne. Hello, Mrs. Yates, Samuel said, grinning like a fool. Hello, husband, Grace replied, and Samuel swept her off her feet and spun her around, making her laugh with pure joy. They held a small celebration at the house afterward, with Mrs. Patterson bringing over a cake she had miraculously produced, and Samuel's friends from the smithy contributing bottles of whiskey for toasts. It was simple and impromptu, but it was perfect, and Grace felt surrounded by warmth and goodwill from people who had accepted her into their community, despite barely knowing her. As the sun set and their guests began to leave, Grace found herself alone with Samuel for the first time as his wife. He took her hand and led her upstairs to his bedroom, the room that was now theirs, and turned to face her with an expression that was equal parts nervous and eager. Grace, he said softly, I know this has all happened very fast. If you need time, if you are not ready for all that marriage entails, I can wait. I can sleep on the couch and we can take things slow. Samuel, Grace said, stepping close to him and placing her hands on his chest, I am your wife now. I want to be your wife in every way. I am not afraid and I do not need to wait. I want you. Samuel's eyes darkened with desire, and he reached up to cup her face with his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much, Grace. I am going to spend the rest of my life making you happy, making you feel safe and cherished and loved." "I love you too," Grace said. "Now please kiss me and make me yours completely." Samuel kissed her slowly and deeply, his hands moving to the buttons of her dress, undoing them with careful patience. Grace helped him, her own hands working at the buttons of his shirt, and soon they were shedding layers of clothing between kisses, neither of them in any particular hurry, despite the desire building between them. When they finally fell into bed together, skin against skin, Grace felt a moment of nervousness mixed with anticipation. Samuel sensed it immediately and paused, looking down at her with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am perfect," Grace said honestly. "I am just savoring this moment. You, me, together like this. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I never want to wake up," Samuel said, and then he kissed her again and made love to her with such tenderness and passion that Grace forgot about everything else, lost in the feeling of being completely and utterly loved. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Grace's head resting on Samuel's chest as he ran his fingers through her hair. She felt peaceful and satisfied and happier than she could ever remember being. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Samuel asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "For carrying me in from the rain," Grace said. "For calling me yours. For saving me in every possible way." "You saved me too," Samuel said. "You gave me purpose and hope and love. You made this house a home again." "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Grace Yates." Grace smiled and snuggled closer to him. "We saved each other then," she said. "That seems fitting." "Yes," Samuel agreed. "Yes, it does." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, safe in content and deeply in love. Outside, the world continued on, but inside Samuel's house, everything was perfect. The next morning brought complications. Sheriff Donovan came by just after breakfast to inform them that Marsh had indeed made bail and was out of jail, though Tom had made it clear that any further harassment would result in serious consequences. "He is claiming that his injury and his night in jail are enough justice, and he is dropping any pretense of the debt you supposedly owe him," Tom explained. "I think seeing you two get married spooked him. As your husband, Samuel has legal authority over your affairs, and Marsh knows he cannot bully Samuel the way he hoped to bully you. Still, I would keep your guard up. Marsh is not known for gracefully accepting defeat. We will be careful," Samuel promised. "And thank you, Tom, for everything you have done to help us." "That is what friends are for," Tom said, tipping his hat. "Congratulations again on your marriage. You two make a fine couple." Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new normal. Grace officially moved her few possessions into Samuel's house, though she had been living there anyway, and set about making it truly theirs. She added curtains to the windows and flowers to the garden, cooked hearty meals for Samuel when he came home from the smithy, and spent her days working on sewing projects that she hoped would eventually allow her to open the dress shop she had always dreamed of. Samuel was an attentive and loving husband, always making sure Grace knew she was cherished. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers picked on his way home from work, a length of beautiful fabric he traded for at the general store, a pair of gloves he made himself in the smithy. They talked for hours each evening, learning everything about each other, and fell into bed each night still marveling at their good fortune in finding one another. But underneath the domestic bliss, there was still tension. Marsh had not made any more direct moves, but his presence was felt around town. Grace heard whispers from the other women at the general store about the Silver Dollar Saloon expanding its operations, buying up property and pushing out competition. She saw Marsh's men on the streets more frequently, swaggering around like they owned the town. It all came to a head one afternoon when Samuel came home early from the smithy, his face grim and his hands clenched into fists. "What is wrong?" Grace asked immediately, seeing his expression. "Marsh is trying to ruin me," Samuel said, his voice tight with anger. "He has been spreading rumors around town that I do shoddy work, that my metalwork breaks easily, that I overcharge customers. 3 ranchers canceled orders today, and one of my best clients told me he is taking his business elsewhere because he heard I could not be trusted." Grace felt fury rise in her chest. "That snake. He is trying to destroy your livelihood because he could not get to me." "It is worse than that," Samuel continued. "I talked to some of the other shop owners, and Marsh has been pressuring them too, trying to get them to refuse to sell me supplies or do business with me. He is trying to drive me out of town entirely." "We have to tell the sheriff," Grace said immediately. "And tell him what? That Marsh is spreading rumors. That is not illegal. And I cannot prove he is behind the supply issues without getting the other shopkeepers in trouble for admitting they were pressured. Marsh is being clever about this, staying just on the right side of the law while still doing as much damage as possible." Grace paced the room, her mind racing. "There has to be something we can do. We cannot just let him destroy everything you have built." "I have been thinking about it all afternoon," Samuel said. "And I think our only option is to confront Marsh directly, make him understand that we will not be intimidated or driven out. Maybe if we stand up to him publicly, show that we are not afraid, he will back down." "Or he will escalate," Grace said, fear creeping into her voice. "Samuel, this man is dangerous. What if confronting him just makes things worse?" "What else can we do?" Samuel asked. "Run, start over somewhere else." "I do not want to run, Grace. This is my home, my business, my life. I will not let Marsh take it from me just because he is a bully." Grace looked at her husband, at the determination and frustration and anger in his eyes, and made a decision. "Then we confront him together," she said. "We show him that he cannot break us, that we are stronger together than he is with all his money and his men. We face him down and make him understand that he is lost." Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Are you sure? This could be dangerous." "I am sure," Grace said. "You stood with me when I needed help. Now I stand with you. We are in this together for better or worse, remember?" "For better or worse," Samuel repeated and kissed her forehead. "All right then. Tomorrow we go to the Silver Dollar and have a conversation with Clayton Marsh." The next day, Grace dressed carefully in her best dress and pinned her hair up neatly, trying to project confidence she did not entirely feel. Samuel wore his good suit, the one he saved for church and special occasions, and together they walked through town toward the Silver Dollar Saloon, heads held high despite the nervous flutter in Grace's stomach. The saloon was quiet in the afternoon, with only a few customers nursing drinks at the bar. Marsh was in his office at the back, and when Samuel and Grace walked in and demanded to see him, the bartender looked nervous but did not try to stop them. Marsh looked up from his desk as they entered, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he said. "The happy couple. To what do I owe the pleasure? You know why we are here," Samuel said, his voice hard. "Stop spreading lies about me and my business. Stop pressuring other shopkeepers to cut me off. Stop trying to ruin my life just because you are angry that Grace chose me over you." "I have no idea what you are talking about," Marsh said, leaning back in his chair with false innocence. "If people are choosing not to do business with you, that is their decision. Maybe they have simply realized you are not as skilled as you think you are." "You are a liar and a coward," Grace said, stepping forward. You hide behind your money and your men because you are too weak to face anyone directly. You tried to intimidate me, and when that did not work, you tried to destroy my husband. But it will not work, Marsh. We will not be driven out and we will not be broken. You have lost." Marsh's smile faded and something ugly flickered across his face. "I have not even started," he said softly. "You think some rumors and a few lost contracts are the worst I can do. I can make sure Samuel never works in this town again. I can burn down his smithy. I can hurt the people he cares about. I can make your lives so miserable that you will beg to leave." "Then do it," Samuel said, his voice calm but filled with steel. "Go ahead and try, but know that if you do, I will not back down. I will fight you every step of the way, and so will everyone else in this town who is tired of your bullying. You think you are powerful, Marsh, but all you really have is fear. And people get tired of being afraid eventually. They stand up to bullies. They fight back. And when they do, bullies like you fall." For a long moment, Marsh just stared at them, and Grace could see the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing options, considering whether pushing this further was worth the potential consequences. Finally, he laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter sound. "Get out of my saloon," he said, "and tell everyone in town that I am done with both of you. You are not worth my time or effort. But Yates, if I ever have the opportunity to make your life difficult without consequence, I will take it. That is a promise." "I will remember that," Samuel said. "Come on, Grace. We are leaving." They walked out of the Silver Dollar with their heads high, and Grace felt a strange mixture of relief and lingering fear. They had faced down Marsh, had called his bluff and won the confrontation, but she knew that this was not truly over. Men like Marsh did not forget slights, and he would be watching for an opportunity to strike back. But as they walked home hand in hand, Grace looked at Samuel and felt her fear begin to fade. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They had each other, and that was enough. Over the following months, Marsh seemed to keep his word. The rumors stopped, Samuel's business slowly recovered, and life returned to something approaching normal. Grace opened her dress shop in a small space Samuel helped her renovate, and it quickly became popular with the women of Colorado City who appreciated her skill and fair prices. Samuel's reputation was restored as his quality work spoke for itself, and soon he had more orders than he could handle. They fell into the rhythm of married life, of small joys and shared dreams. Grace discovered she was pregnant in the early spring of 1877, and Samuel's joy was so immense that he told everyone they met, bursting with pride and excitement about becoming a father. "It is going to be a boy," he insisted, placing his hand on Grace's still flat stomach. "A strong boy who will grow up to be a blacksmith like his father." "It might be a girl," Grace pointed out with amusement. "A strong girl who will grow up to be whatever she wants to be." "As long as the baby is healthy and you are safe, I do not care," Samuel said, kissing her gently. "Boy or girl, this child will be loved beyond measure." The pregnancy was not easy. Grace suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months and fatigue that left her exhausted by midday. But Samuel was endlessly patient and supportive, taking over more of the household chores and making sure Grace rested as much as possible. He fretted over her like a mother hen, which Grace found both touching and occasionally irritating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one evening when he insisted she sit down instead of helping with the dishes. "I can still function." "I know," Samuel said, "but I worry. I love you so much, Grace. I could not bear it if anything happened to you." Grace softened and pulled him close. "Nothing is going to happen to me," she promised. "I am strong and I have the best husband in the world taking care of me. We are going to be fine." But her words proved more optimistic than accurate. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Grace woke up in the middle of the night with terrible pain in her abdomen. She cried out, waking Samuel, and he immediately saw the blood staining the sheets. "No," he said, his voice filled with terror. "No, no, no. Grace, hold on. I am going to get the doctor." "Do not leave me," Grace gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Samuel, I am scared." "I am here," Samuel said, but she could see the panic in his eyes. "You are going to be all right. You have to be all right." He ran for the doctor anyway, and Grace was left alone in the dark, feeling her body betray her and the life inside her slipping away. By the time Samuel returned with Dr. Morrison, Grace was sobbing with pain and fear, and the doctor's grim expression told her everything she needed to know. She lost the baby that night, a tiny boy who never drew breath, and with him went a piece of Grace's heart that she was not sure would ever fully heal. Samuel held her as she cried, his own tears falling silently as they grieved together for the child they would never know. The days that followed were dark. Grace fell into a deep depression, unable to eat or sleep or find joy in anything. Her dress shop stood closed, her clients understanding, but the emptiness of her days only making things worse. Samuel tried to comfort her, but he was grieving too, and sometimes Grace caught him in the smithy just standing there, staring at nothing, his face etched with sorrow. It was Mrs. Patterson who finally pulled Grace back from the edge. The older woman came by one afternoon with a basket of food and a firm expression. "Enough," she said, sitting down next to Grace on the couch. "I know you are hurting. I know you lost something precious and that the pain feels unbearable. But you still have a life, Grace, and a husband who loves you desperately. You cannot give up. That baby would not want you to give up." "How do you know?" Grace asked bitterly. "How do you know what he would have wanted?" "Because I lost 3 babies before I finally had my daughter, Mrs. Patterson said quietly. 3 little ones who never got to grow up. And I wanted to die each time, wanted to just curl up and disappear. But my husband reminded me that we still had each other, that there was still love and life to be lived. And eventually, we were blessed with a healthy child. But even if we had never had her, even if all we ever had was each other, that would have been enough. Because love is what matters, Grace. Love is what gets you through." Grace looked at the older woman, at the understanding and compassion in her eyes, and felt something inside her crack open. She started crying again, but this time it was different. A release of the grief she had been holding so tightly that it was poisoning her from the inside. Mrs. Patterson held her while she cried, and when Samuel came home from the smithy and found them like that, he joined them, and the 3 of them sat together while Grace finally, truly began to mourn. Healing was not quick or easy. It took months before Grace could think about the baby without breaking down, before she could see pregnant women in town without feeling a stab of jealous pain. But slowly, with Samuel's love and support, she found her way back to herself. She reopened her dress shop, threw herself into her work, and tried to focus on the blessings she still had rather than the one she had lost. Samuel never pressured her to try again for another child. He seemed content just to have Grace healthy and by his side, and he showered her with gentle affection and patient understanding as she worked through her grief. Their love deepened in those dark months, tempered by shared sorrow into something even stronger and more resilient. It was almost a year later, in the spring of 1878, when Grace discovered she was pregnant again. Her feelings were complicated, joy mixed with terror, hope mixed with fear. Samuel was cautiously optimistic, not wanting to get too excited in case lightning struck twice. "We will take it one day at a time," he said, holding her close. "And we will hope and pray that this time things are different." This time was different. The pregnancy was easier, with less sickness and more energy, and Grace felt stronger and healthier than she had before. Dr. Morrison monitored her carefully, and as the months passed and the baby continued to grow and thrive, Grace and Samuel allowed themselves to hope. In January of 1879, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Samuel cut the cord with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face, and when Dr. Morrison placed the squalling infant in Grace's arms, she felt a rush of love so powerful it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." They named him Thomas, after Sheriff Donovan, who had helped protect Grace in those early days, and the older man was deeply honored. Thomas was a beautiful baby with Samuel's dark hair and Grace's green eyes, and he was healthy and strong and absolutely perfect. Samuel was a devoted father from the very beginning. He fashioned a cradle with his own hands, decorated with intricate metalwork that was both beautiful and functional. He sang to Thomas in the evenings, lullabies his mother had sung to him, and he walked the floor with the baby when he fussed, patient and gentle even in the middle of the night. Grace watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. This was the life she had dreamed of, the family she had hoped for, and it was more wonderful than she ever could have imagined. Marsh had faded into the background of their lives. He still ran the Silver Dollar, still strutted around town like he was important, but he left Samuel and Grace alone. Occasionally Grace saw him watching her in town, his expression unreadable, but he never approached and never made trouble. She wondered sometimes if he had genuinely moved on or if he was just biding his time, but she tried not to dwell on it. Her life was too full of good things to waste energy worrying about Clayton Marsh. As Thomas grew, so did the Yates family happiness. He was a cheerful baby who became a curious toddler, always getting into things and making Samuel and Grace laugh with his antics. Samuel taught him about the smithy, letting him watch from a safe distance as he worked, and Grace taught him his letters and numbers, preparing him for when he would eventually start school. In 1881, Grace gave birth to a daughter they named Anna, a tiny thing with blonde hair and Samuel's brown eyes. Thomas was enchanted with his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her and showing her his toys. Samuel declared that he was the luckiest man alive, with a beautiful wife and 2 perfect children, and Grace could not disagree. Their lives were not without challenges. Money was sometimes tight, and Samuel had to work long hours to keep the smithy profitable. Grace balanced running her dress shop with caring for 2 young children, and there were days when she was so exhausted she could barely stand. But they faced everything together, and their love never wavered. One evening in the summer of 1882, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas and Anna play in the yard, Samuel took Grace's hand and squeezed it gently. "You remember," he said, "that night 6 years ago when I found you hiding under this porch?" "I remember," Grace said, smiling at the memory. "I was so scared and so cold, and you came down and offered me your hand." "Best decision I ever made," Samuel said. "Bringing you inside, calling you mine, falling in love with you. Everything good in my life came from that moment." "Everything good in my life came from it too," Grace said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You saved me that night, Samuel, not just from the rain and not just from Marsh. You saved me from a life of loneliness and fear. You gave me a home and a family and love. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Samuel corrected gently. "That is what love is, I think. Giving everything and receiving everything in return, building a life together that is more than either of us could have created alone." Grace looked at her husband, at the man who had carried her in from the rain and declared her his, who had protected her, and married her and built a family with her. She thought about all the twists and turns that had led her to that porch on that rainy night, all the choices and chances that had brought them together, and she felt nothing but gratitude for every single one. "I love you, Samuel Yates," she said. "I love you too, Grace Yates," Samuel replied. "Today and always." They sat together in the fading light, watching their children play, and Grace felt a peace and contentment that went bone deep. This was her life now, the life she had never dared to dream she could have, and it was perfect. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the normal joys and sorrows of life. Thomas grew into a strong, kind boy who was fascinated by his father's work and spent hours in the smithy learning the trade. Anna was bright and curious, always asking questions and reading every book she could get her hands on. Grace's dress shop thrived, becoming known throughout the region for quality work, and Samuel's smithy was busier than ever. In 1885, Grace discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise given that she was now 31 and had not expected to have more children. But the pregnancy went smoothly, and in early 1886, she gave birth to another son, whom they named James. Thomas and Anna were old enough to be genuinely helpful with the baby, and having them there to assist made everything easier. Clayton Marsh had a heart attack in 1884 and died, though not before selling the silver dollar to a businessman from Cheyenne who ran it much more respectably. His death removed the last shadow hanging over Grace and Samuel's lives, and Grace found she felt nothing but relief when she heard the news. The man who had once threatened to destroy her was gone, and she and Samuel and their family were thriving. As the children grew older and more independent, Grace and Samuel found themselves with more time to just be together, to remember what it was like to be young and newly in love. They would take walks in the evening after the children were in bed, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. They would sit by the fire in the winter, Samuel working on metalwork projects while Grace sewed, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. "We did well," Samuel said one evening in 1890, after Thomas had announced his intention to take over the smithy when Samuel was ready to retire. "We built a good life, raised good children. I am proud of what we have created together." "So am I," Grace said, setting aside her sewing to move closer to him. "We have been very blessed." "More than blessed," Samuel said, pulling her into his lap like he still did sometimes even though they were middle-aged and parents of 3. "We have been lucky and happy and deeply, deeply in love. That is more than most people get in a lifetime." "It all started because I hid under your porch in the rain," Grace said, laughing softly. "Such a small thing, such a random choice, but it changed everything." "It was not random," Samuel said, kissing her temple. "It was fate. You were meant to be mine, Grace. I believe that. I believed it the moment I saw you, and I believe it now. You were always meant to be mine, and I was always meant to be yours." "Then I am grateful to fate," Grace said, "for bringing us together, for giving us this life." They sat together as the fire crackled, and Grace thought about the journey they had taken together. From that first night when she was frightened and alone under his porch, to building a life and family together, to growing old side by side. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. Thomas took over the smithy in 1895 when Samuel finally decided to retire, and he ran it with the same skill and integrity his father had shown. Anna married a schoolteacher and moved to Laramie, but visited often with her own growing family. James followed his passion for horses and became a rancher, running a successful operation just outside of Colorado City. Samuel and Grace grew old together, their hair turning gray and their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminishing. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, the same porch where Grace had once hidden in the rain and watched the world go by, content in each other's company. In 1905, Grace fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away and progressed into pneumonia that left her weak and bedridden. Samuel nursed her with the same gentle care he had shown her that first night, sitting by her bedside and holding her hand, refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested he get some rest. "I am not leaving you," Samuel said firmly when Grace tried to tell him to go sleep in the other room. "I carried you into this house 29 years ago and called you mine. I'm not leaving you now." Grace smiled weakly, her breathing labored but her eyes full of love. "You are a good man, Samuel Yates, the best man. I have been so lucky to be yours." "I am the lucky one," Samuel said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You gave me everything, Grace, everything that mattered. I love you so much." "I love you too," Grace whispered. "Always." But Grace was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. She survived the pneumonia, though it left her frailer than before, and she and Samuel had several more years together. Years of watching their grandchildren grow, of celebrating holidays and anniversaries, of simply being together in the quiet way that only people who have loved each other for decades can manage. When Grace finally passed in her sleep in 1912, at the age of 58, Samuel was beside her, holding her hand. Their children gathered around them, and the whole town mourned the loss of a woman who had been kind and generous and had built a life of meaning and purpose. Samuel lived 3 more years after Grace's death, but everyone said he was never quite the same. Part of him had died with her, the part that had been fully alive only when she was there to share it with him. He spent his days in the little house they had shared, surrounded by memories, and he talked to Grace as though she were still there, telling her about their grandchildren and the town news and how much he missed her. When Samuel passed in 1915, his children buried him next to Grace in the Colorado City Cemetery, under a simple stone that read Samuel and Grace Yates, together always. And the whole town agreed that if any 2 people had earned their eternal rest together, it was the blacksmith and the woman he had carried in from the rain, who had built a love story for the ages. Their great-grandchildren would tell the story for generations, about how Grace had hidden under Samuel's porch in the rain, and how he had carried her in and called her his, and how that one moment of kindness and connection had grown into a lifetime of love. It became a legend in Colorado City, a reminder that sometimes the most important moments in our lives come when we least expect them, and that true love can bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances. And on rainy nights, people passing by the old Yates house would swear they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch, holding hands and watching the storm together, still in love after all these years, still together, still his and still hers for all eternity.